Hey everyone, this is the Spoon Dude back with another action figure review. This time we'll be doing a review on sort of a random figure. This is the SH Figuarts Dragon Ball Kid Goku figure. This figure was an event exclusive, I think from 2019. You can see the box here, which is reminding you that it is an event exclusive. So you can see here, this is the Kid Goku from the start of Dragon Ball, where he's sort of wearing this bluish, purplish kind of gi. I think that's what you'd call this. So you can see that right there. I got this figure because I recently got back into Dragon Ball. I've been rewatching the original series as well as some of Dragon Ball Z Kai. You wouldn't know from looking at most of my channel, but I do like Dragon Ball. I grew up with it as a kid. I remember my first exposure to it was actually in toys. I think when I was a kid, I had some old Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT figures. They might have been bootlegs. I'm pretty sure I got them from like a flea market. You know, I eventually got to seeing all the shows. I actually watched Dragon Ball Z Kai when it was airing. I think that was my first actual exposure to the story. And you know, eventually I watched Dragon Ball GT as well, and went back to the original Dragon Ball. I don't think I ever actually finished the Dragon Ball series when I was a kid. I did watch sort of like maybe the first season, you know, where they first gathered the Dragon Balls, and then some of the first World Martial Arts tournament. But I remember really liking it back then. Kid Goku was one of my favorite characters when I was watching it, and now having rewatched more of the series, of course, had to get an action figure of Kid Goku. I remember the first release of this figure in the orange attire. I remember wanting to get that figure when it came out, but I just never got around to it. And that was the version I was looking to get, but of course, second market prices are really expensive on that one. And weirdly enough, the regular release is more expensive than this exclusive version now. So I ended up going with the slightly cheaper, but only relatively cheaper exclusive version with the earlier attire, which I think worked out perfectly for me since, you know, when I was a kid, Kid Goku was wearing this in the first season. So this is the Kid Goku that I know. And I also will say this figure lacks some of the accessories from that original release. He doesn't come with the Nimbus Cloud, sadly. So that is a bummer. But I think the figure is good enough that I didn't need it too badly. But anyways, enough talking. Let's look at the figure itself. I think it's a really nice figure. It's not perfectly show accurate. You can see his proportions. He's a lot leaner and taller than he looked in the show. I feel like this figure is more based on a more sort of modern art style for Dragon Ball. It almost looks more like how he does in Dragon Ball GT, at least in the way he's built. And I think part of the reason they did that was just for the sake of the action figure, so that they can fit all the articulation in. If they did him a little bit shorter and stubbier, like he looks in the show, maybe it would have been harder to put all that articulation in. He's also a little bit too tall in regards to the scale compared to other figures. So here is the more kind of modern Goku figure, which I also got recently because of my Dragon Ball rewatching. But you can see here, he's like over half his height. And the head size in particular, like that head is massive compared to that head. And looking at the show, he really shouldn't be this big. So he really is completely out of scale to what he should be. But again, if they made him properly to scale, he would have been like half this height maybe, or like 2/3 of this height. And it would have probably been really hard to make all the articulation work without it just falling apart. And of course, it would be harder to sell something that small. So I understand why they did that. Aside from that, the proportion and scale, it still looks really good. I love the head sculpt. Let's take a look at that. To me, the head sculpt is probably one of the best things about this figure, and that's what looks closest to the show most of all. You can see this face is probably my favorite face he comes with. He has two others, but I really like the way that it looks. You can see they have the eyes there and the eyebrows that look sort of like 2D style, very flat, which works well on this figure. And you can see the open mouth with his tongue there. Just looks straight out of the show, and I think really represents Goku really well. That's sort of just wholesome happiness there. You can see the hair is also nicely sculpted. They did a good job sort of taking his wacky hair and bringing it to 3D so that it looks good from different angles. So pretty happy with that. And of course, like I said, he has two other facial expressions. So you get this one, and then you get this one, which is similar. You know, happiness, though you can see his teeth on this one, and of course his eyes are closed. And I really like this face as well. He makes this expression quite a lot in the anime, so pretty happy with this one. And then his last face is this one, and I think, like I said, I don't have the regular release, but from looking at pictures, I think this face is exclusive to this version, and the regular release had a similar expression, but with an open mouth. So you get this sort of closed mouth with sort of a kind of cocky expression, I guess, since he's got that one eyebrow raised. Kind of like the DreamWorks face, right? But I like this face as well. I feel like this one works best for fighting poses, where he's sort of more confident. So, yeah, I really like that. And as for the rest of the figure, it looks pretty nice. There's not a lot of paint on this guy, besides the face and the accessory. You pretty much just get paint on the torso for that, you know, exposed part on his collar. And then the wristbands, and then the feet. Besides that, it's all just molded plastic. I think the tail is painted too, but that's a separate piece. But yeah, so it's molded plastic with maybe like a matte finish on top. There's a little bit of shine there, but I think that's just because it's under bright lighting. It is fairly matte and finished, so I do like that. You know, could have used some shading, but I think it looks pretty good. And it is supposed to be sort of the more simple Dragon Ball style. But all the folds on his pants there and his shirt are sculpted nicely. I like how his arms don't have a lot of definition to them, so they at least got that right from the show, and I guess manga too. And then you get the feet there, his little feet, and you get the treads on the bottom. You can see they have paint there. Some of it's rubbed off from just standing him a bunch though. But you get the flesh tone there. I will say the flesh tone on the torso looks a little bit off. Like I said, that's painted. So let's just take a look at that. I feel like it's a little bit translucent. You can see, I think it's just painted on his chest there, and then the neck looks like it's a separate piece that's inserted in. So that looks fine, but then the chest there is a little bit off. It doesn't quite match the neck, but that's a small thing. Alright, so let's look at articulation. His neck articulation is really bizarre, and honestly I don't quite like it that much. So here's his neck articulation. It's hard to show, but as you can see, there's a ball joint that goes into the neck, and that's attached to another ball that doesn't do anything, and that's attached to this hinge. And the way it's attached, it's like offset so that the hinge is already, you know, pushed back just in a sort of vanilla straight pose, so that having the head just sitting up and down normally, the hinge is already set far back. And the reason that's a problem is that if you want the head to look up, you can't really use that hinge because it's pretty much already hinged all the way back. To give you a comparison, here's the regular Goku, and you can see there's the ball joint on top of a hinge, and that hinge is going up for the head to normally just sit straight. So if you want the head to look up, you can just push the hinge back, and that looks up. Not a lot up, but you can see you're using the hinge, and there's room for it to go back so that he can look up, and then you can move the hinge forward, and he can look down. But with this hinge, you can't move it back because it's already set far back. So you can see once it's on the neck, you can't really hinge it back. So it's already, like, you can't make it look up with that hinge. You're pretty much just using the ball peg at the very top there. That's where you get any articulation. All this hinge gives you is just swiveling from the peg. And you can't even move it down. Like, if you have the face off, you can see, oh, he can look down. But because the hinge is so far forward on the neck, you can't really look down besides the ball joint. You're really just using that ball joint and the hinge just a little bit. Which, I mean, that's okay. That's not bad. But then if you want to move it any further, the face is starting to come off because that hinge is so far forward that it's pushing the face off. So the head articulation seems overly engineered for not a lot of motion. I mean, you'll be fine. You get the swivel, and that ball joint gives some play. But I really wish they just simplified it. I don't understand why it had to be that weird offset hinge. But aside from that, the rest of the articulation's pretty okay. You get this swivel at the shoulder, sort of like a butterfly joint where the shirt meets the shoulders. So that works really well, especially for sort of that Kamehameha pose, so I like that. And then the shoulders are just standard ball hinges. And actually, they're just straight up ball hinges since they're so small. You can even see the pin for the hinge there. But yeah, that goes out nicely, and that of course swivels. You get a bicep swivel. You get a hinge at the elbow that bends like that. You get a ball hinge at the wrist. You get this hinge in the torso that kind of extends up, and then it doesn't bend too far, but it's pretty decent. It doesn't really bend back though, and there's barely any side to side. And then at the waist, feels like there's another hinge or another ball joint without using the legs, you know. So there's that, and that rotates at the waist. So there you go. Then the hips are on just regular ball pegs. And this is where my other problem with the articulation comes in. So it articulates fine. You actually can get that leg quite a bit far up and even back a lot, and also decent splits. But my problem is these sort of floating pieces are separate pieces, and that's my problem right there. They can come off because you can see they're open at the bottom. They aren't like a closed ring or anything. I don't see why they couldn't have been closed at the bottom so that they just were stuck to the hips but still moved. But yeah, if you move the leg up all the way, then that has a tendency to fall off, and that's really annoying. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can try to avoid it, and it's not that hard to just put them back where they belong. But yeah, wish that didn't pop off. You get a thigh swivel around that ball joint, so that works okay. You get a hinge at the knee, which bends pretty decent for his size. And then you get a ball hinge at the ankle, up and down, that pivots, and then you get a toe hinge. So I'd say the articulation works pretty nicely, minus that head joint and these things popping off. And then I guess another point of articulation comes with the tail. You can see there's a socket there, and the tails have a ball peg, and that attaches so that can rotate and move up and down, side to side a little bit. Tails do come off pretty easily though, so that's kind of annoying. I kind of wish they were on ball hinges instead of just ball pegs. I feel like that would have made a tighter connection and would have made them a little bit more articulated. But since we're talking about the tails, this is one of the ones he comes with. It's a slightly dynamic pose that's kind of posed outward and curved. He has an alternate tail, which is a lot straighter and has this curve towards the bottom, and you can just switch that out right there. And I feel like this is better for a standing pose since it doesn't take up as much real estate on the back right here. So there's that. You also get the power pole, I guess, sheath, the holder right there. And that's nicely painted. You get the rope there. And that comes separate in the package. And you can just put that on. You have to take off his head. And then that slips, over his arms and stuff. And the nice thing about this holder is the power pole can unpeg. It's only this short piece, but that's so if you're posing him with the full power pole, then you don't have to have like a second one that's on his back. And this is just a red rod, but it works pretty well, and he can hold it nicely. You can see how tall it is right there. Then his other accessory is the Dragon Ball, which is of course necessary for a Dragon Ball figure. I don't know how well you can see it on camera. You can see there are the 4 stars on there for Gohan's Dragon Ball. My hand is shaking, but it's so small. But yeah, you can see the 4 stars there, and it's a really nice clear orange plastic. It's not completely smooth and polished. I mean, you can see where I imagine it was on a sprue in the factory or whatever, and there's a seam line running through it, but it still looks good. Once it's in his hand, you hardly notice those little imperfections. So, woo. So yeah, there's the Dragon Ball. The rest of his accessories include the faces that I already showed, and then all of his alternate hands. You got two martial arts sort of style posing hands with the two fingers bent. You got some power pole holding hands, which are cupped to hold the power pole, and they are closed. The index finger is attached to the thumb, so you have to slide the power pole in, but they hold it pretty nicely. You get some karate chopping hands that almost look like he's doing sort of a salute also. You get some peace sign hands or eye poking hands. Then you get two open hands that have the fingers wide open and flat, and then two other open hands that have the fingers more bent, sort of for like a Kamehameha kind of pose. So really nice assortment of hands. You can really get him into all sorts of martial arts fighting poses. So really enjoy that. You get a lot of stuff. It's very fun to pose. It has its issues like the tail popping off easily or the hip things popping off easily. And the head articulation's weird, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, he's a really fun figure to have. And for me, it's a good standalone Kid Goku figure that I can just pose around when rewatching the show or just have on my desk. And he looks really nice. So yeah, happy with my purchase. And if you're a Dragon Ball fan, you like Kid Goku, and you somehow don't have this figure or the regular release, I highly recommend tracking it down. It will be pricey, but like I said, if you're a fan, you'll probably really enjoy it. So that's the review. Let me know if you want to see more Dragon Ball videos. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on my next video.